A city's soul is carved in its public squares. An unknown Roman architect wrote that 2,000 years ago, and his words hold a profound truth. The statues, arches, and columns of ancient cities were not just decorations. They were a deliberate language speaking of power, belief, and identity to every citizen who walked past. This video will give you the key to understanding that hidden language, letting you read the stories etched into stone across forgotten empires. We will travel from the glazed brick lions of Babylon to the marble forums of Rome, uncovering the strategic choices behind every monument's placement. Why did an emperor's statue always face a certain direction? What secret message was sent by the gods chosen to guard a city's gates? By the end, you will see the ghosts of ancient cities not as random ruins, but as carefully scripted stages for civic life. What story do you think the oldest statue in your own town might be trying to tell? This collective personality was not something written down in a charter. It was breathed into existence through the stories people told, the gods they worshipped together, and the triumphs they collectively celebrated. A city was far more than its walls and markets. It was a sacred character shaped by a shared memory of a legendary founder, a pivotal victory in a distant war, or a deep bond with a specific deity. In Rome, the very story of its twin founders, Romulus and Remus, fed a self-image of fierce rivalry and ultimate destiny. Athens, in contrast, built its identity around the goddess of wisdom, Athena, a choice that proclaimed its values of intellect and strategic prowess to the entire world. Think of your own hometown. What single story or symbol best captures its spirit? That essence is what ancient planners made visible in stone and bronze. They translated a city's intangible soul into a physical landscape you could walk through and experience firsthand. The grand public spaces were not left to chance. Every temple, every statue, every towering column was deliberately placed to continuously broadcast this identity to its citizens. It was a constant, silent reinforcement of who they were as a people. This is why we must learn to look at these ruins not as a random collection of broken buildings, but as the bones of a living personality. This visual language of power was broadcast everywhere. Walk through the main gate of any major ancient city, and you would be greeted not by a simple welcome, but by the towering figure of the emperor. This was far more than a portrait. It was a carefully crafted message, the ancient equivalent of a 24-hour news channel promoting the state. The figure you saw was not an ordinary man. He was depicted as a heroic conqueror, perhaps with a foot resting on a captured enemy's helmet. He might be shown as a generous benefactor, holding a scroll that symbolized new laws for the people. In some cases, the features of the ruler would subtly blend with the attributes of a god, suggesting a divine right to rule. This was civic propaganda in its most elegant and unavoidable form. The sheer cost of these monuments was part of the message. A statue made from gleaming white marble, hauled from a quarry hundreds of miles away, or one cast in shimmering bronze, told every citizen about the empire's vast resources and global connections. It was a silent but potent demonstration of economic strength. By saturating the public spaces with these idealized images, the ruling class could shape the very identity of the city. They could promote an image of unchallengeable authority, of peace and prosperity brought by their leadership. This engineered identity was meant to become the accepted truth for everyone living within the walls. It reveals how deeply art, political power, and the consciousness of a city were intertwined. The stones were not just speaking, they were persuading. But the message was not just in the stone itself, it was in the very ground it stood upon. An emperor's statue placed in a quiet garden would whisper, while the same statue at a city's main gate would shout. Ancient planners were masters of this psychology of space, understanding that location transformed art into authority. They chose their spots with the precision of a modern advertiser buying a billboard in Times Square. The busiest crossroads, the grandest plazas, the most sacred temple precincts, these were the prime locations, the channels through which a city's identity was continuously broadcast. Every citizen, in their daily comings and goings, was an audience member for this silent, permanent performance. A towering victory column erected at a major intersection did more than commemorate a battle. It forced every merchant, every soldier, every visiting diplomat to walk directly through the idea of military triumph. They physically moved around its base, their daily paths altered by its presence, internalizing the message with every passing glance. In the same way, the immense facade of a temple dedicated to a city's patron god, positioned to dominate the main public square, was a constant visual anchor. It reminded people that commerce and conversation happened under the watchful eyes of the divine. This strategic placement wove specific values directly into the fabric of everyday life. Over time, this created a powerful mental map for every citizen. They did not just see a street with a statue. They understood that this particular corner was where we celebrate our strength, and that specific hill was where we connect with the gods. The city itself became a kind of script, its pathways and landmarks guiding not just physical movement, but thought and belief. To truly understand an ancient city's identity, then we must learn to read this lost spatial language, to see how the placement of a single stone could shape the worldview of thousands. This leads us directly into the unique layouts of specific cities, where these principles were brought to life in stunningly different ways. Ascending the Acropolis was a journey into the heart of Athenian self-belief. The steep climb itself was a ritual, leaving the mundane world below for a realm of divine connection and civic pride. At the summit, the arrangement of buildings was not a random collection of shrines. It was a carefully orchestrated narrative in marble, each structure playing a specific role in telling the story of who the Athenians were. Dominating everything was the Parthenon. This was far more than a temple to the goddess Athena. It was the ultimate expression of the city's identity, a declaration of their cultural, political, and spiritual supremacy. Its brilliant white marble could be seen from the harbor, from the farms, from the bustling Agora below. Every glance upward reinforced the same idea, that the city lived under the direct favor and protection of its wise patron deity. That constant visual anchor shaped the consciousness of every citizen, but the message was in the details. The grand gateway, the Propylaea, was not merely an entrance. It was a deliberate threshold designed to control and frame the experience of arrival. Passing through its monumental columns, you transitioned from the secular to the sacred, your perspective perfectly aligned to appreciate the breathtaking view of the Parthenon. This was architectural stagecraft, building anticipation and emphasizing the significance of the space you were about to enter. Once inside the sacred precinct, another building offered a different chapter of the city's story. The Erasure, with its delicate porch of the maidens, was deeply tied to the city's mythical origins. Those graceful caryatid statues standing in for columns were more than architectural supports. They were a direct link to the legendary kings and heroes from whom the Athenians believed they were descended. Together, this ensemble on the rock communicated a complete identity. It spoke of a people chosen by a goddess of wisdom, a society that valued artistic genius and democratic ideals, and a community with a heroic lineage stretching back to the very dawn of time. The Acropolis was their mission statement, carved in stone for all eternity. It presented Athens not just as a powerful city-state, but as the pinnacle of civilized achievement. This fusion of divine favor, political innovation, and artistic mastery was the core of their urban soul. Yet, as we will soon see, another empire across the sea would use the same language of stone and space to tell a completely different story about itself. While Athens spoke of gods and wisdom, Rome's city center told a story of raw political might. The Roman Forum was not a secluded sanctuary on a hill, but the city's bustling living room, courtroom, and news center all at once. Here, the air was thick with the smells of commerce and the sounds of political debate. Every emperor who reshaped this space understood its power. They did not just build monuments, they engineered experiences. Augustus, the first emperor, transformed the Forum into a stage for his new regime. He filled it with grand basilicas, which were not churches but immense halls for business and law. He raised temples that honored both traditional gods and his own deified adopted father, Julius Caesar. Each structure was a chapter in a carefully edited biography of the empire, emphasizing peace, piety, and military strength. The placement of these buildings was a masterclass in psychological messaging. Consider the rostra, the famous speaker's platform. It was strategically repositioned to stand directly in front of the temple of the deified Julius Caesar. When a politician stood to address the crowd, he literally had the shrine of a god made from an emperor at his back. His words on law, on war, on the future of Rome were now framed by a backdrop of divine authority. Oratory became intertwined with the cult of the emperor, a subtle but powerful suggestion that to challenge one was to challenge the other. Triumphal arches served as permanent headlines. They did not merely commemorate a victory in some distant land, they froze that moment of conquest in stone, forcing every citizen who walked beneath it to relive the empire's triumph. The sheer density of these monuments created a landscape where it was impossible to escape the narrative of imperial glory. A person could not go to the market, attend a trial, or simply cross the city without passing a dozen reminders of who was in charge and what they had accomplished. This was a city identity built on a continuous loop of achievement and authority. It taught everyone, from the lowest citizen to the most ambitious senator, that Rome's soul was one of relentless expansion and absolute power vested in a single ruler. This carefully crafted stage makes the contrast with our next city even more striking, a place where urban identity was not about projecting power outward, but about fulfilling a singular divine command. Alexandria rose from the sand with a single command. Unlike Athens or Rome, which grew slowly over centuries, this city was a complete vision poured onto a blank canvas, its identity engineered from the very first stone. Founded by Alexander the Great and perfected by his successors, the Ptolemaic dynasty, Alexandria was designed to be the ultimate Hellenistic capital, a dazzling fusion of Greek intellect and global ambition. Every monument, every street, was a deliberate piece of propaganda for a new kind of empire, one built on knowledge as much as conquest. Its most famous landmark, the immense lighthouse of Pharos, was a perfect symbol of this dual purpose. This wonder of the ancient world did more than guide ships safely into the great harbor. Its colossal fire, visible from vast distances, was a beacon of welcome and a declaration of power. It announced Alexandria as the brilliant gateway between Europe, Africa, and Asia, a center of trade and ideas where the entire known world could meet. The lighthouse was not tucked away, it was the city's front door, a functional marvel that also served as a brilliant piece of civic branding. This calculated urban planning extended from the harbor deep into the city's heart. The Grand Canopic Street was the central spine of this planned identity. Lined with endless colonnades and gleaming statues, it ran straight as an arrow from the eastern sun gate to the western moon gate. This was not a meandering path but a grand processional way, a deliberate demonstration of scale, order, and control. To walk its length was to experience the Ptolemaic vision firsthand, moving through a corridor of engineered splendor that left no doubt about the city's wealth and sophistication. The entire layout was a statement that here human reason had triumphed over chaos. The ultimate expression of this philosophy lay at the city's very center. Here the Ptolemies placed their royal palaces not in a secluded fortress, but integrated with the legendary Mausoleum and its great library. This was a revolutionary statement. By physically linking their seat of power to the world's greatest center of learning, they broadcast that their rule was founded on knowledge, luxury, and cultural patronage. It crafted an identity of enlightened monarchy, setting Alexandria apart from the martial glory of Rome or the divine patronage of Athens. The city itself was their masterpiece, a place where you could walk from a global port, down a majestic avenue, and into a palace of scholars, all within a single, breathtakingly planned urban experience. These divine guardians were far more than symbolic decorations. They were seen as living, breathing members of the urban community, their stone and bronze forms believed to pulse with protective power. When a city placed a colossal statue of Zeus or Jupiter directly adjacent to its main gate, it was not making a request for protection. It was stationing a celestial soldier on the front line. The ancients genuinely believed that the mere presence of such a figure could turn back an invading army or calm a raging storm. This was a form of spiritual defense engineering, where the most valuable real estate in the city was given over to a divine garrison. The psychological impact on the citizens was immense. Walking past a 20-foot-tall marble Athena every day, her shield raised and gaze stern, instilled a deep sense of security. It reinforced the idea that their city was not just a collection of houses, but a divinely favored fortress. This belief system transformed the entire perimeter of a city into a sacred boundary, watched over by stone sentinels who never slept. The most striking examples of this protective function come from Mesopotamia. Here, the Lamashu stood as monumental guardians, these incredible hybrid creatures with the body of a powerful bull, the wings of an eagle, and the intelligent face of a human ruler were not placed randomly. They were strategically positioned at the most vulnerable points, the grand entrances to royal palaces and major temples. A visitor would have to walk directly between their immense, watchful forms, passing under their symbolic authority. They served a dual purpose, warding off malevolent spiritual forces believed to cause illness or misfortune, while simultaneously projecting the king's power and connection to the divine. The choice of which specific god or goddess to honor in this way was never arbitrary. It was a direct reflection of the city's soul and its source of survival. A coastal trading city might raise a towering statue of Poseidon or Neptune overlooking its harbor, linking its economic prosperity directly to the god of the sea. A community famed for its metalworkers might place a mighty Hephaestus at its industrial quarters entrance. This divine branding made the city's priorities clear to all, citizen and foreigner alike. The urban landscape became a three-dimensional map of sacred priorities, a physical testament to what the people valued most and where they believed their safety and prosperity truly came from. This deep integration of the divine into the daily mechanics of urban life reveals a world where every street corner could be a chapel and every city wall a prayer. A city's founder's statue was far more than a piece of public art. It was the anchor point for its entire identity, a physical claim to a legendary past. The famous bronze she-wolf of Rome, with the tiny figures of Romulus and Remus nestled beneath her, did not merely depict a charming myth. It stood as a public justification for the city's very character. Here was a community founded by a fighter who triumphed over his own brother, raised by a fierce, protective beast. This story, cast in enduring metal, explained to every Roman why their society valued strength, competition, and relentless expansion. The statue provided a divine right to conquest, rooted in the very moment of the city's birth. It answered the question of who they were by pointing to a foundational act of violence and survival, transforming a turbulent beginning into a source of immense national pride. This strategy of rooting identity in a heroic figure was perfected by Greek colonists. When they set out to establish new cities across the Mediterranean, they brought with them an official founder, the oikist. Upon his passing, this individual was often honored with a heroine, a shrine built for him right in the city's central agora. This was not a quiet tomb in a distant cemetery. It was a perpetual presence at the heart of daily life. Citizens would conduct business, debate politics, and gather socially in the literal shadow of their founder. He became a constant, silent participant in the city's evolution, a moral compass and a reminder of their shared origins. These monuments forged a powerful sense of common ancestry among people who may have come from different villages or backgrounds. They created an instant, shared history for a brand new community, fostering unity and a collective sense of purpose. By looking at a single statue, a citizen understood their place in a story much larger than themselves. They were the heirs to a hero's legacy, tasked with continuing the work he began. This narrative strategy of defining a people by their origins would soon be applied not just to mythical founders, but to the very real, world-altering events that shaped their history. A triumphal arch was a city's permanent headline. Unlike a statue that could be moved or a temple that served many functions, these structures had one primary purpose: to freeze a single moment of military victory in stone for all time. They transformed fleeting news of a battlefield success into an everlasting part of the urban environment. The Arch of Titus in Rome offers a masterclass in this strategic messaging. It was not placed in a quiet forum but directly on the Via Sacra, the sacred way, the very road that triumphant generals and their armies would parade down upon returning to the city. As citizens walked beneath its single opening, they were surrounded by carved scenes depicting the sack of Jerusalem. They could see the seven-branched menorah and other sacred objects being carried in procession, a permanent record of subjugation. This was genius placement. Every future parade, every religious festival that passed this spot would unintentionally reenact that specific conquest, layering the present celebration with the ghosts of past military glory. The arch framed the very concept of victory, defining it for generations. This narrative impulse reached its most elaborate form not in an arch but in a column. Trajan's column is one of the most intricate history books ever created, but it is written in marble, not ink. Wrapping around the 100-foot-high structure is a continuous spiral frieze that would stretch for over 600 feet if unwound. It tells the story of the Dacian Wars not as a single event, but as a detailed epic. A citizen could stand and slowly turn, following the carved figures as they built bridges, fought battles, and ultimately brought a foreign kingdom to its knees. This was not just art, it was a public archive of Roman military ingenuity and logistical might, a spectacle designed to inspire awe and reinforce a very specific identity. The column's placement was equally significant, standing in the middle of a complex that included Trajan's Forum and his market. This meant that the story of conquest was physically and visually linked to the economic prosperity and civic order that such victories supposedly brought. You could not engage in commerce or politics without being reminded of the military engine that made it all possible. By anchoring these monuments to the routes of public processions, ancient planners ensured the city's identity was not just seen but performed. A triumph was the ultimate civic ritual, a day when the entire population would line the streets to watch the army return, displaying captured treasure and prisoners. The path they took was a carefully chosen stage, and the arches and columns were its most important set pieces. Marching through an arch meant walking through a gateway of victory, literally stepping into the role of conqueror. Parading past a column covered in scenes of battle was to be surrounded by the evidence of your own prowess. These rituals, repeated year after year, wove an identity of invincibility and divine favor directly into the community's shared memory. The stone narratives provided the script, and the people, in their celebrations, became the living actors. This fusion of architecture and public performance created a feedback loop of pride and power, telling every citizen and every visitor exactly what this city stood for. The city's living room was its central plaza. In Athens, this was the bustling Agora, and in Rome, the sprawling Forum. This was not a quiet park, but the vibrant heart of daily existence, a place where commerce, conversation, and politics swirled together in a constant hum. And every piece of art here was carefully chosen to shape the civic soul. You would not just find gods and emperors in this space. You would encounter the faces of local heroes, the wealthy benefactor who funded a new public building, the celebrated philosopher whose ideas defined an era, the poet whose words captured the city's spirit. Walking through the Agora was like moving through a three-dimensional hall of fame, a pantheon of civic virtue. It taught everyone, from the merchant to the student, what kind of person the city valued and what kind of achievements it celebrated. This curated environment provided the visual script for daily life. One of the most famous backdrops for this civic theater was the Stoa Poikile, the painted stoa in Athens. This long, colonnaded walkway was more than just a shelter from the sun. Its inner walls were covered with massive paintings depicting the city's great military victories alongside powerful scenes from mythology. Imagine politicians and citizens gathering here, debating the fate of the city under the gaze of these heroic images. The art was not just decoration, it was an active participant in the conversation, reminding everyone of the courage and heritage they were expected to uphold. It framed political discourse within a context of past glory and shared destiny. This dense concentration of meaningful art in the most frequented space meant the city's core values were never out of sight. Whether the ideal was democratic debate, intellectual pursuit, or commercial prosperity, these principles were physically embodied in bronze and paint. They were subject to constant communal engagement. A citizen might point to a statue of a famous thinker while arguing a point, or a parent might use a mural of a legendary battle to teach a child about their history. The art facilitated a continuous, unspoken dialogue about what it meant to be an Athenian, a Roman, a member of that specific urban community. It was in this vibrant, human-scaled heart of the city that identity was not just proclaimed by rulers, but actively negotiated and reinforced by the people themselves. The city itself could become a sacred parade. In ancient Babylon, the main thoroughfare was not merely a street, it was a carefully scripted spiritual experience. During the Grand New Year festival, this processional way transformed into a divine pathway, leading from the magnificent Ishtar gate directly to the temple of the city's chief god, Marduk. The journey was choreographed by art itself. The walls lining the route were covered in glazed bricks of a stunning lapis lazuli blue, upon which marched hundreds of golden lions, the sacred animal of the goddess Ishtar. Towering over this path was the gate itself, adorned with alternating rows of dragons and bulls, symbols of Marduk and the weather god Adad. This was not random decoration. Every step a priest or citizen took was framed by these powerful images, reinforcing Babylon's identity as the chosen and protected home of the gods. The path was a narrative in clay and color, building anticipation and awe until the final destination was reached. Far to the west, a different kind of processional way carved its way up a mountainside. The sacred way in Delphi was not a celebration of a single city, but a competitive display of an entire civilization's piety. As pilgrims climbed towards the famous oracle of Apollo, they walked a path lined with elaborate treasuries. These were not simple buildings, but ornate mini-temples built and filled with offerings by rival city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Thebes. Each treasury was a statement, a marble billboard proclaiming the wealth, power, and devotion of its home city. The path was also crowded with statues of heroes, victors, and mythical figures, all donated by the grateful and the ambitious. Walking this route was to move through a physical ranking of political and religious influence. The air was thick with unspoken rivalry, every gleaming monument a challenge to the next. These routes reveal a profound truth about ancient urban design. Art was used to choreograph not just movement but emotion itself. The planners of these cities understood that identity was not just something you thought about, it was something you physically performed. By guiding people along a predetermined path and controlling what they saw at every turn, they could shape a collective feeling of reverence, pride, or even competition. The city became a stage, and its citizens the actors in a grand, recurring ritual. The very stones under their feet were directing the play. The stone itself held a voice. A statue carved from the local limestone of a city's own hills told one story, a tale of self-reliance and regional pride, but a figure sculpted from brilliant white marble, hauled from a quarry hundreds of miles across the sea, told an entirely different one. This was the silent, potent language of materials, a dialect of wealth and connection understood by every ancient observer. The choice of stone or metal was never just about durability or aesthetics. It was a public declaration of a city's place in the world. When Athens built the Parthenon from the flawless marble of nearby Mount Penteli, it was making a profound statement. The stone was not only beautiful, it was local, signaling that the city's greatness was drawn from the very land it stood on. This was an identity born of Attic soil, refined by Attic hands. It spoke of a sophisticated, self-sufficient power whose resources and artistic genius were homegrown. Contrast this with the visual rhetoric of Imperial Rome. Walking through the Roman Forum in its heyday was like strolling through a geological map of the empire's conquests. You would see pillars of glowing yellow marble from Numidia in North Africa, panels of deep purple porphyry from the deserts of Egypt, and green serpentine extracted from the mountains of Greece. This was not a random collection of colorful stones. Each piece was a trophy, a physical proof of Rome's ability to command the resources of the known world. The very ground beneath a citizen's feet whispered of distant lands subdued and vast supply chains mastered. It was an overwhelming sensory experience of imperial dominance. The medium of bronze added another layer to this conversation. Casting a life-size bronze statue was an immense technological and financial undertaking. It required scarce tin and copper, expert metalworkers who could manage the perilous pouring process, and a political will to dedicate such valuable material to art instead of weaponry. A bronze figure gleaming in the sun conveyed a message of permanence and immense value. It was an investment in the future, a declaration that the person or god it represented was worthy of this costly, enduring tribute. A city filled with bronze statues was a city flaunting its economic muscle and technical prowess for all to see. So the next time you look at an ancient monument, ask not only who it depicts, but what it is made of and where that material began its journey. The answers reveal a hidden economic biography, telling you whether a city saw itself as a proud local power, a wealthy trade nexus, or the unstoppable heart of a continent-spanning empire. A city's identity was never set in stone, even when it was literally carved in stone. The statues and monuments we see as permanent were often the most vulnerable targets when power shifted. A new ruler understood that to truly conquer a city, you had to conquer its story, and that meant rewriting the script displayed in its public squares. This practice of erasure and replacement reveals just how potent these symbols were believed to be. When Roman generals pillaged Greek cities, they did not merely take gold and treasure. They systematically removed the finest statues, the very embodiments of Greek civic pride, and transported them to Rome. These works were not hidden away. They were put on public display, often in the Forum, transforming symbols of a rival's identity into trophies that amplified Rome's own glory. The original city was left culturally diminished, its artistic soul hollowed out, while Rome's identity as the supreme collector and inheritor of civilization was reinforced with every plundered masterpiece. This was identity theft on a monumental scale. In Egypt, a different kind of rewriting occurred, one that worked not by removal but by alteration. A pharaoh might approach a majestic sphinx or a statue of a predecessor. Instead of destroying it, his craftsmen would carefully recarve the facial features and hieroglyphs, transferring the credit and divine power of the monument to the new king. It was a pragmatic and profound act, claiming the authority of the past while literally reshaping its visage to serve the present. This act of claiming an older legacy was far gentler than the Roman method, but the intention was similar: to control the narrative told by the urban landscape. The most deliberate form of this erasure was a Roman practice known as damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. When an emperor was deemed a tyrant or a traitor by the Senate after his passing, his memory was officially sentenced to oblivion. His statues were toppled, the bronze ones often melted down for reuse. The stone portraits were systematically defaced, their noses and ears broken off to destroy their spiritual presence and power. Inscriptions bearing his name were chiseled away. This was not random vandalism. It was a state-sanctioned ritual, a purging of a failed identity from the collective consciousness of the city. Walking through the Forum after such a decree, you would see empty pedestals and scarred marble, a powerful negative space where a ruler used to be. These empty plinths spoke just as loudly as the statues they once held, broadcasting the message that this man and everything he stood for was no longer part of the Roman story. What does this tell us? The chisel marks on an ancient statue are not just damage. They are historical records of a fierce struggle over a city's soul. The urban landscape was a perpetual battleground for the narrative of the past, where identity was a prize to be won, lost, and violently reclaimed by those who held the hammer. But the silent stone was rarely left to speak for itself. The visual power of a statue or a relief was almost always anchored by the written word, carved directly into its base or an adjacent slab. These inscriptions were the official script for the public performance of identity, providing the precise narrative that the imagery was meant to evoke. They told you exactly who you were looking at, why they deserved this honor, and who had granted it. A statue of a general, for instance, might be awe-inspiring, but the inscription at his feet transformed that awe into a specific historical fact. It listed his name, his titles, his most significant military victories, and often the name of the Senate or the people who had commissioned the work. This text was a permanent claim of legitimacy, a public record that prevented the memory of the individual from fading or being reinterpreted over time. The city's story was now fixed in granite or marble. This practice extended far beyond honoring individuals. The very laws that governed civic life were often carved onto large stone stelae and erected in the most frequented public spaces. Imagine a main city gate or a central marketplace flanked by these imposing slabs. They displayed treaties with foreign powers, new legal codes, or decrees from the ruling body. This made the legal framework of the city an unavoidable part of its physical identity. A citizen was not just subject to the law, they lived within it, walking past its physical manifestation every single day. It was a powerful statement that the rules of society were not hidden in scrolls in some archive, but were open, permanent, and foundational to the urban environment. In 5th century Athens, this strategy was used to project imperial power. The city publicly displayed the so-called tribute lists, records of the financial contributions demanded from its allies in the Delian League. These inscriptions, placed for all to see, were a constant, stone-cold reminder of Athens' dominance over its maritime empire. They were a financial tally of submission, transforming abstract political control into a quantified, publicly audited fact. This written layer ensured that the civic story being told was the one meticulously crafted by its patrons. It anchored the soaring imagery in concrete achievements and explicit intentions, leaving little room for alternative readings. This carefully curated written world, however, was only one half of the story. For a truly complete picture of a city's soul, we must also listen for the echoes of its most vibrant and ephemeral art, the performances and festivals that brought these stones to life with color, music, and motion. Yet the city's identity was not only carved in marble, it was woven into fabric and painted on temporary stages. While monuments told a story of eternal values, festivals and their fleeting art provided the annual updates, the living chapters that kept the civic narrative fresh and responsive. These celebrations transformed the entire urban landscape into a dynamic, breathing performance. In Athens, the heart of this renewal was the Panathenaic festival. Each year, a grand procession would carry a newly woven peplos, an elaborate sacred robe, through the city streets and up to the Acropolis. This was not merely a delivery, it was a profound ritual of renewal. The robe was a gift for the ancient wooden statue of Athena, and its journey through the city reaffirmed year after year the living bond between the people and their patron goddess. The entire community participated in this act of devotion, watching the vibrant, embroidered fabric pass by, a tangible symbol of their shared identity being literally refreshed before their eyes. It was a powerful reminder that their connection to the divine was not a relic of the past, but an ongoing relationship that required active participation. Rome mastered this art of the temporary with its triumphal processions. A returning general's parade was a masterpiece of ephemeral propaganda. The route would be lined with detailed paintings depicting key moments from his victorious campaigns, creating a mobile, open-air art gallery of conquest. Portable floats would display heaps of captured arms, glittering treasures, and models of conquered cities. For a single day, the entire city became a transient monument to victory, a spectacle of power that was immediate, visceral, and impossible to ignore. These displays served a vital function. They integrated recent events directly into the city's story, ensuring its identity of invincibility was constantly updated with fresh evidence. This ephemeral art offered a flexibility that permanent stone could not. A monument took years to build, but a painted banner or a ceremonial float could be created in months, allowing a city to celebrate a recent victory, honor a new leader, or respond to a current crisis. This kept the civic identity from becoming a stagnant museum piece. It was a living dialogue between the enduring values set in stone and the urgent realities of the present moment. These fleeting creations, witnessed by thousands together, forged a powerful, immediate sense of communal pride and cohesion. The shared experience of the spectacle, the collective awe at the passing floats, the unified voices in celebration, these moments wove the citizens together into a single, living entity, reaffirming their place in the city's unfolding story. This vibrant world of performance and ritual reveals that a city's soul was not just in what it built to last forever, but equally in what it created to live brilliantly and briefly for its people. Even the simple act of drinking water could be a political statement in an ancient city. Public fountains and the grand, shrine-like structures known as nymphaea were far more than plumbing. They were three-dimensional advertisements for the generosity of the elite, transforming a basic human need into a spectacle of civic care and technological prowess. A humble spout in a wall provided water, but a multi-story nymphaeum, faced with colored marble and adorned with statues of river gods and smiling nymphs, provided an experience. It made the life-giving resource beautiful, framing it as a gift from a benevolent ruler or a wealthy patron to the people. This was public relations carved in stone and flowing with water. The strategic placement of these structures was key to their message. They were not hidden away in back alleys but erected at the busiest crossroads, directly outside bath complexes or along the main colonnaded streets. This meant that every citizen on their way to the forum, to the baths, or simply heading home would have to pause at this monument to generosity. They would gather around its basins, listen to the calming sound of its cascades, and see the shimmering statues that celebrated the source of this abundance. In that daily ritual of collecting water, the individual was seamlessly integrated into a narrative of a well-provided-for community. The engineering behind these displays was a core part of their boast. A simple fountain required a reliable source, but a grand nymphaeum demanded an immense and constant flow, often delivered over great distances via aqueducts. The very existence of such a structure was a silent but powerful demonstration of the city's mastery over its environment. It proclaimed an ability to bend nature to human will, to bring the bounty of distant mountains directly into the heart of the urban landscape. A city with multiple ornate fountains was therefore making a clear statement about its identity. It was a place of advanced engineering, of wealth sufficient to fund massive public works, and of a governing class that invested in the comfort and well-being of its citizens. The water was life, but the marble facade and the divine statues were the carefully crafted identity of a sophisticated, caring, and truly modern urban community. The city's story did not end at its walls, but continued in the silent communities built for those who had passed. Lining the major roads leading in and out of the urban center, elaborate funerary monuments created a city of the dead that served as a powerful preamble to the city of the living. A traveler approaching Rome on the Via Appia, for instance, would walk for miles through a landscape dominated by these memorials. They were not hidden away but placed deliberately for maximum visibility, their inscriptions and sculptures facing the road itself. This was the final and most enduring form of civic advertisement, a statement in stone about what the community valued in its most prominent members. The Pyramid of Cestius, for example, was not merely a tomb. Its striking foreign shape, rising beside a major gateway into Rome, announced to every visitor that this was a global city, a place where exotic tastes and immense personal wealth could leave a permanent mark on the skyline. It spoke of a society that celebrated individuality, even in memory, on a grander scale, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus was so magnificent it became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This was not a private, somber affair. It was a massive public monument celebrating a ruler, Mausolus, and it so perfectly defined the idea of a monumental tomb that we still use the word mausoleum today. Its placement within the city plan, adorned with intricate sculptures and rising in towering tiers, projected an image of a powerful, stable, and culturally sophisticated kingdom. It told all who saw it that the rulers of this place were worthy of a legacy that rivaled the gods. The reliefs and inscriptions on these tombs did more than record a name and date. They narrated entire lives, carving values into eternity. A detailed scene of a military battle on a sarcophagus celebrated the virtue of courage. A list of public offices held by the individual inside emphasized a lifetime of civic duty and responsibility. A depiction of the deceased surrounded by their family underscored the importance of lineage and domestic harmony. For the traveler passing by, these visual stories set a distinct tone. A city whose roadside was lined with monuments to military heroes was announcing a culture of strength and conquest. One that honored wealthy merchants and benefactors was signaling a society built on commerce and patronage. The City of the Dead was a carefully curated introduction, preparing a visitor for the character of the vibrant, noisy community that lay just ahead through the gates. It answered a profound question before it was even asked: what kind of people built this place, and what do they hold sacred? Behind every monument stood a patron with a purse. The question of who paid for public art opens a direct window into a city's power structure and its economic soul. In democratic Athens, a project like the Parthenon was a massive public undertaking. Its staggering costs were drawn from the city's treasury and, significantly, from the tribute paid by its allies in the Delian League. This was not a gift from a single wealthy individual. It was an assertion of collective will and imperial wealth, a statement that the city's glorious identity was funded and owned by the people as a whole, a direct reflection of its democratic ideals. The identity being projected was one of a powerful, collective citizenry. The story shifts dramatically in the Roman world. Here, the funding of public art became a primary tool for social climbing. Wealthy citizens and even successful freedmen who had gained their liberty would pour their personal fortunes into commissioning statues, building bathhouses, or funding public games. This practice was known as euergetism, a term meaning good deeds or benefactions. For these individuals, a public monument was an investment in social prestige and political influence. The Latin phrase you would often see carved into the base of a statue, ex pecunia sua, meaning from his own money, was not a simple statement of fact. It was a boast, a public badge of honor that announced the patron's generosity for all to see. This system created a fascinating bargain. The city gained beautiful new infrastructure and art without spending its own funds, while the benefactor purchased lasting fame and a foothold in the political arena. By identifying the patron, we can instantly decode whose version of the city's identity was being promoted. Was it the state projecting an image of unified strength? Was it the emperor solidifying his divine right to rule? Or was it a wealthy merchant using his fortune to carve his name into the very story of the city, seeking to buy a legacy that his birth did not automatically grant him? This financial layer reveals that the urban landscape was not just a gallery of power, but a marketplace for influence, where public generosity was the currency for crafting a lasting name. The city's identity was not a silent film. It was a rich, multi-sensory symphony, and the placement of public art was its conductor. Imagine the soundscape of an ancient forum. Beyond the murmur of the crowd, you would hear the distinct, resonant clang of a bronze statue as the wind passed over it, a deep metallic hum that announced its presence long before you saw it. Your own footsteps would echo differently depending on the ground beneath you, from the dull thud on packed earth to the sharp, authoritative click as you stepped onto a marble-paved processional way. These were not random noises. They were deliberate acoustic signatures designed to heighten the significance of a space and make you feel, physically, that you were somewhere important. A statue was not merely an object to be viewed, placed near a public fountain or a grand nymphaeum. Its visual power was amplified by the constant, calming sound of splashing water. This auditory layer created an atmosphere of abundance and tranquility, wrapping the civic message in a soothing, sensory experience. The very air contributed to this immersion. Walking past a temple, the scent of burning incense or roasting sacrificial meats would have been unmistakable, a fragrant signal that you were approaching a divine precinct. This holistic design ensured that civic identity was not an intellectual concept, but a full-body experience. You felt the shift in sound under your feet. You heard the bronze sing on the wind. You smelled the sacred spices. You were living inside the city's story, not just observing it. This sensory approach extended to vision as well. Planners were masters of space and perspective. A major monument was rarely crammed into a corner. It was given room to breathe, set within an open plaza that allowed a person to walk a full circle around it. As you moved, the statue or column would transform. A shaft of sunlight would catch a different carved detail. A shadow would shift to reveal a hidden expression. The backdrop of the sky would frame it anew with every step. This dynamic visual experience made the art feel alive and interactive, a participant in your journey through the city rather than a static poster. The entire urban environment became an immersive theater of belonging, where every sense was engaged to reinforce the same core message of who you were and where you belonged. This collective feeling, this shared sensory world, was the ultimate goal. It bound the community together in a way that words on a scroll or a single visual symbol never could. You did not just know you were an Athenian or a Roman. You heard it, you felt it, you walked through it every single day. A ziggurat did not invite you in for a conversation. Rising from the Mesopotamian plain in massive, receding tiers, this towering temple platform was a statement of absolute vertical hierarchy. Its sheer, inaccessible height separated the priest-king, the city's crucial link to the divine, from the populace below. In cities like the ziggurat was the undeniable focal point, its shadow falling across the entire urban layout. This art and architecture communicated a theocratic identity, one where the city's primary purpose was to serve the gods through a privileged intermediary. The urban soul was not debated in a public square. It was decreed from a sacred staircase that reached for the heavens. This stands in stark contrast to the bustling, human-scaled world of the Greek Agora. Here, the city's identity was not handed down from on high, but hammered out in the horizontal space of the public square. The Agora was the heart of human interaction, a messy, vibrant arena for politics, commerce, and philosophy. Temples were certainly present, but they were often integrated into this civic landscape, not set apart from it. A sanctuary might border the marketplace, a constant reminder of divine favor, but it did not dominate the conversation. The art here celebrated the citizen, the athlete, the thinker. The identity being forged was one of shared citizenship and collective reason, a world away from the top-down spiritual authority of Mesopotamia. Meanwhile, in the Persian capital of Persepolis, the art told a story of imperial unity. The grand stairways leading to the royal audience halls were lined with intricate reliefs, but these carvings did not depict battles or conquests in a violent sense. Instead, they showed an endless, orderly procession of representatives from every corner of the empire, each bringing distinctive tribute to the king. A Mede followed by an Egyptian, an Ionian Greek behind an Ethiopian, all moving in harmonious rhythm. This was an identity of universal rule and peaceful integration. The city's message was that it was the administrative center of the world, a place where diverse nations came together under a single, benevolent authority. These fundamental differences in artistic focus reveal a profound diversity in what ancient people believed a city should be. Was it a conduit to the gods, a forum for its citizens, or the capital of the world? This vibrant tapestry of urban identities, however, would soon face its greatest challenge as the legions of a single, expansionist power began to cast a very long shadow. The shadow of the Roman eagle fell across 1,000 cityscapes, but it did not always erase what was already there. As the empire expanded, a fascinating architectural tension emerged between a universal imperial identity and the stubborn persistence of local character. From the misty hills of Britain to the sun-baked plains of Syria, the Romans implanted a recognizable urban template. A standard set of civic buildings appeared everywhere, a familiar trio of forum, basilica, and Capitolium temple that announced to all, "You are now in a Roman city." This was the empire's brand, a powerful visual language of control and belonging. Yet, to see only this standardization is to miss the most compelling part of the story. Local communities were not blank slates. They were masters of a subtle cultural negotiation, weaving their own traditions into the imperial fabric. A temple in Roman Gaul, for instance, might boast the clean lines and triangular pediment of a classical Roman design, but its interior walls could be adorned with carvings of the antlered god Cernunnos or local protective spirits. The building spoke the language of Rome, but it whispered the old stories of the land. This creative fusion gave birth to a hybrid urban soul. A city could now express two identities at once, proclaiming its membership in a vast, cosmopolitan empire while still holding fast to what made its people unique. The very placement of public art in these provincial centers reveals this delicate dance. An emperor's statue would stand proudly in the new forum, its marble face gazing imperially over the central plaza. But just a street away, in a smaller shrine tucked between houses, a revered local deity carved from native stone might still receive offerings from the townspeople. This was not necessarily a conflict, but a pragmatic and often peaceful coexistence. The urban landscape became a map of this negotiation, where imperial power and local traditions shared the same streets, creating an identity that was both universal and deeply, proudly particular. The silent testimony of a city's stones often begins with an empty space. Archaeologists searching for a lost monument first look for the negative imprint it left behind, a pattern of foundation trenches cut deep into the earth, or the distinct wear patterns on a stone base where a massive statue once stood anchored. These ghostly outlines are the first clues, revealing the precise footprint and orientation of a structure that has long since vanished. A base positioned at a major crossroads, for example, tells us that the statue it held was meant for maximum visibility, a deliberate focal point in the daily flow of human traffic. But who or what did that base support? This is where the scattered fragments come in. A broken piece of marble with a carved inscription can name the honored individual. A sculpted hand clutching a spear, or the remnant of a distinctive helmet, can identify the subject as a warrior or a specific god. It is a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle where every shard of stone or bronze helps rebuild a lost identity. For the broader city plan, researchers now use non-invasive eyes. Ground-penetrating radar and other geophysical methods send pulses into the earth, mapping the ghostly outlines of buried walls, roads, and plazas without ever turning a shovel of soil. This creates a subterranean map of the urban skeleton, showing how monuments related to the streets and buildings around them. To this scientific data, we can add an ancient voice. The writings of travelers like Pausanias, who meticulously described the art and buildings of Greek cities in the 2nd century, serve as a priceless literary guidebook. He noted which statues stood where, what stories they told, and how they were venerated. By overlaying his descriptions with the physical evidence from excavations and surveys, we can achieve something remarkable. We can virtually replace a statue on its original base, understanding not just what it was, but how it functioned. We can analyze its sightlines, determining what a citizen would have seen when they looked at it, and what would have been visible behind it. This holistic reconstruction transforms a field of ruins into a dynamic stage. We stop seeing a collection of broken columns and start understanding the choreography of civic life. We can trace the processional route and know which heroic figures line the path. We can stand in the forum and appreciate how an emperor's statue dominated the entire space. This scientific detective work is essential because it allows us to move from appreciating individual artifacts to comprehending the grand, intentional design of the urban landscape itself. It reveals the ancient blueprint for identity, giving voice back to the stones that were meant to speak for eternity. That ancient conversation between art and identity never truly ended. You can hear its echoes in the grand, tree-lined axis of the National Mall in Washington, D.C., where the Washington Monument's obelisk and the Lincoln Memorial's temple create a narrative of democratic ideals and national unity. This is not a random arrangement. It is a deliberate, modern application of the same spatial language spoken in the Roman Forum, using scale and alignment to inspire a specific feeling of reverence and shared history in every visitor who walks that path. Our own city centers and neighborhood squares continue this tradition. A bold, abstract sculpture in a newly developed plaza does more than fill empty space. It actively brands that area as creative, forward-thinking, and culturally vibrant, shaping the identity of the community that gathers there. The ancient strategies are all around us. We still use art to mark significant gateways, from the iconic arches that welcome visitors to our parks to the monumental bridges that define a city's skyline. We still raise statues to our heroes, though the figures we choose to honor now reflect a much wider and more diverse set of achievements. The core impulse remains identical: to use public art as a tool for building civic pride and reinforcing a collective sense of who we are. This long view gives us a powerful new lens for our own environments. When we understand that an ancient emperor carefully chose the location for his statue to control a narrative, we can start to ask similar questions about the art in our own public squares. What story is this city telling about itself through this monument? Whose values are being celebrated here, and whose stories might be missing from this curated landscape? This critical awareness leads directly to the ethical heart of the practice. The power to shape a city's identity through art is immense, and with it comes a profound responsibility. Who gets to decide which histories are cast in bronze and which are left out? How do we ensure that our public spaces tell a story that includes all members of the community, reflecting a full and honest tapestry of our past and our aspirations for the future? The stones of antiquity challenge us not just to see, but to question. The empty pedestals of the ancient world speak as loudly as the statues they once held. This deliberate act of erasure, the damnatio memoriae, was a stark admission that public art is never a neutral act of decoration. It is, and has always been, a deeply political choice about who is worthy of honor and who controls the story a city tells about itself. When a Roman emperor's face was chiseled from a monument, it was a state-sanctioned effort to purge a failed identity from the public consciousness. The scarred marble was a powerful reminder that the narrative set in stone was always subject to revision by those who held the hammer. This ancient struggle over memory finds a direct echo in our own time, as communities worldwide grapple with monuments to historical figures whose legacies are now seen in a more complex light. The toppling of a statue in a modern square is not a new phenomenon, but part of a very old conversation about the soul of a city. It forces us to ask the same difficult questions ancient citizens might have silently considered. Who has the right to decide which stories are cast in bronze for eternity, whose heroism is celebrated, and whose suffering is rendered invisible by the absence of their story? The ancient world shows us that every monument, by its very existence, makes a statement about value. A public space filled with statues of military generals tells one story about a community's priorities, while a square that honors artists, scientists, and community organizers tells another. The choice of whom to immortalize is a powerful act of inclusion, but it is also inevitably an act of exclusion. This history does not provide easy answers for our modern debates, but it does offer crucial context. It empowers us to look at our own civic landscapes with a more critical and informed eye. We can begin to ask not only who a monument honors, but what specific version of history it was erected to promote. We can consider whether the frozen ideals of a past era still resonate with the vibrant, diverse, and multifaceted community that lives in its shadow today. The challenge then and now is to create public spaces that do not simply celebrate a single, unchanging story, but that reflect the dynamic, often complicated, and ever-evolving identity of the people who call that city home. Our journey ends with a powerful truth that the stones of an ancient city were its most eloquent storytellers. From the divine guardians watching over Athens to the triumphant arches dominating Rome, every piece of public art was a deliberate word in a city's ongoing narrative. The strategic placement of a monument, the costly material from which it was carved, and the words etched at its base all worked in concert to shape a shared identity. This was a language of power, belief, and community spoken not with sound but with space and stone. It reminds us that our own built environment is never neutral. It is a continuous physical narrator of who we are and what we value. So the next time you walk through your own city, pause for a moment. Look at the statues in your central square and the memorials in your parks. Ask yourself what story they are telling about your community's past, its present, and its aspirations for the future. What modern parallels do you see in the art that surrounds you? Share your discoveries in the comments and subscribe to keep unraveling the profound mysteries of our shared human history.